What's going on, y'all? This is your girl, Brie Undeniably, checking in for another episode of my new speaker series, Deep Conversations with Dope Individuals, where we're discussing development, decision-making, and dedicating yourself to purpose. Today, I am here, as always, with another super dope individual. Before I introduce him and give him the introduction that he deserves, I'm going to give a couple quick shout-outs to start the podcast. First and foremost, if you are watching this on YouTube or listening to this through your headphones or your speakers, you'll hear the audio quality, you'll see the video quality. That is all thanks to Gotham Podcast Studio. So they are hooking it up over here. I am super appreciative to be working with them. So shout out to Gotham. Another quick shout out, as I always do, MC Kicks. They have sponsored me with so much of their merch. They're always hooking it up for me. If you have not checked out MC Kicks, head over to their Instagram or any of their profiles at EMCEEKICKS. And finally, shameless plug. I appreciate you if you're listening here. If you're watching, you'll see that I have my Dope Individual long sleeve tee on. You can get any of my Dope Individual merch or I Am Possible merch over at my website which is brieundeniably.com. You can find me at brieundeniably. All right, we're kicking into it. I have Dr. Danny Brassell here. I am so excited to have him. Dr. Danny Brassell. Danny, how are you today?
Hunky dory. Thanks for having me on, Bree, and thanks for spreading joy in the world. We need a lot more of you.
Great. I love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think we need a lot more of you as well, and I think my listeners will agree once we kick into it. So let me give you that introduction that you deserve. So a highly sought after speaker, trainer, and coach known as Jim Carrey with a PhD, Dr. Danny Brassell has spoken to over 3,000 audiences worldwide and authored 16 books, including his latest, Leadership Begins with Motivation. He is the co-founder of www.thereadinghabit.com, the world's top reading engagement program. One more hello, Danny. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm hunky dory. I'm sorry, I just got done shoveling snow, so I was disheveled coming in.
Disheveled from shoveling. I
Yep.
totally understand. No one likes to shovel. I don't know. Well, maybe I'm making assumptions. Maybe some people do. Well, okay. So the way I like to start all of my podcasts, in the counseling community, we like to meet our clients where they're at. I like to do the same thing here with my guests, so that listeners can understand a little bit more about you. So help us meet you where you're at and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thanks, Bree. I appreciate that. So I'm considered America's leading reading ambassador now, and it's ironic because I grew up hating reading. My father was a librarian. I always hated the public library. The furniture was always uncomfortable. It always smelled funny in the library. There was always some elderly woman telling me to be quiet. There's always some freaky homeless guy who thinks he's a vampire hanging out in the library. I always hated it. And it wasn't until much later in life when I started teaching in the inner city in South Central Los Angeles, where I realized a lot of my students didn't have the advantages I had growing up. And I said, shame on me. I mean, I was very blessed, Bria. Both of my parents were in the home. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we always had food on the table. Mm-hmm. My parents read to us, in front of us, and we always had plenty of access to reading materials. And I wanted to start spreading that joy for reading around the world, just because I find schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read. But the question I always ask parents and teachers is, what good is it teaching a kid how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I've never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read. I want them to choose to do it on their own. And so my program basically only takes a couple of months and shares all kinds of tricks for parents and teachers to get kids to read more, read better, and most importantly, to love reading. So there's a very long answer to your very short question, Bree.
We can go longer because I'm already intrigued. I think it's incredible what you're doing. I think that is a well-deserved title to be the number one leading reading ambassador, and to have developed a program. The concept is so simple but so powerful to teach kids why to read rather than just teach them how to read. Because we know that there is something really powerful about having that why behind everything we do. We wouldn't be able to have longevity in lives or our careers if we didn't have that why that we were holding on to firmly. And I think that to have that with reading for kids is so, so impactful, and I know is making an incredible difference in uh, every community that is getting their hands on your program.
Well, and one of the things I appreciate about you, Bree, and the counselors that are listening is that you do start with where people are at. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I was with a first grade teacher watching her, and she asked a little boy if he liked basketball. He said, "I like soccer." And she said, "Well, I picked out a basketball book." And I'm like, you just, the kid just gave you a clue. Get him a soccer book. I do this with parents all the time. The research is very clear on this. It doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. It doesn't matter if you're reading James Joyce or James and the Giant Peach. People who read more read better. One of the secrets I tell people is the little boy who only reads Captain Underpants is going to be a better reader than the little boy who refuses to read anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Captain Underpants is the gateway drug to Shakespeare, but you got to get him hooked on it first, and that's where you're coming from, is always start with where they are at that point.
I love that you said Captain Underpants is the gateway drug because it's so true though. Those, when you're younger, you're looking for something, um, you know, that is going to grab you, engage you, excite you. You haven't you haven't yet, started learning on your own and, continuing your education post graduation. It's like if you're doing this because this is something that is you're being told to do, how do you get them to want to do what they're being told to do? And
Yeah.
that's finding that excitement in whatever it might be, wherever those pages might be for a kid. It's meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely, Brie. I remember when I was in high school, I had a teacher, and she forced us to read The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And no offense to people that like The Scarlet Letter. The book's basically about this woman named Hester Prynne who's committed adultery, and so she's forced to wear an A on her chest. And I raised my hand and asked my teacher if I could wear a B on my chest because I was so bored reading that book. And she could have found a zillion other things that I would have been interested in, that I would have read freely and I would have been excited about reading. I always tell people, I mean, the more excited you are to read, the more likely you are to read, and the more you read, the better you get. When I was teaching second grade, I had a little boy, Kiara, and Kiara's first grade teacher told me, "Kiara don't know nothing." I'm like, "Well, thank you for that." Well, Kiara, who don't know nothing, came into my room one day. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Brassell, you see Barkley last night? He had 18 points, 16 boards." I'm like, "Thank you, Kiara." From that point forward, every day after lunch, I'd sit him on my lap. We'd read the LA Times sports page together. And would you know it, Bree? By the end of the year, Kiara was one of my best readers. And all that kid ever read about was sports. But we got to get them hooked.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's good teachers, good parents are eavesdropping all the time. You hear a kid talking about NASCAR, get them some NASCAR books. They're talking about J Lo, get them a biography on Jennifer Lopez. I mean, I don't care. I'm married and have 3 kids, and I'm reading different books with each of them. My wife, we just read this series of really cool series called The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. It's like a modern day, well, it's set in the 19th century, but it's written kind of modern day, like a
Okay.
Jane Austen type. It's funny. It's good series. My oldest daughter, what's the name of that series? We're reading like Shadows and Fire, I think is what it's called. She's into fantasy. My son is into the Civil War right now, so we're reading The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. And then my youngest daughter, I don't know why she wanted to read The Great Gatsby, which I never liked that book either, but she likes it. It doesn't matter what I like. What matters is she likes it. So I'm
Right.
reading about West Egg and East Egg, and again, it drives me nuts. But to each his own. None of them ever find a book that I'm interested to read with. But if I need the relationship, I need to find out what they're interested in.
It's so key. And I love that this isn't just in work for you. This is full family. This is, you breathe this. This is what you do in your world, and I think that it's really wonderful to know that even what you're working with students on, you're also working with your own children on, and I think that just that's the power of a true teacher right there.
Yeah, you got to integrate your passion. I mean, every teacher knows that, when I right now, what I really do right now is I go around the country trying to convince teachers and principals not to quit. People have no idea the numbers in this country, especially with the pandemic. I was in North Texas 2 weeks ago, and on the exact same day, 8 superintendents retired. I couldn't believe it. And
Whoa.
we're seeing teacher shortages left and right in districts where even smaller districts. I was in a district of, I think it was about 30,000 students, and they had 850 teacher openings. I mean, there's not enough subs to cover that. So
My
it's just
goodness.
really sacrificing. People are on the front lines, and my heart goes out to them, and just trying to come up with as many ways to keep people positively excited about what they do. I mean, too much of school turns out to be the misery of learning. I mean, the one thing I always want my kids to get out of my class is, hey, you're incredible and you should become a lifelong learner. I want you to be constantly curious. I want you always asking why. And hopefully I accomplished that.
I mean, it definitely seems like you have, or you're on your way to. I, you know, again, with what you're implementing with your family and what you're doing, but all I'm thinking about right now is how difficult it must be with what you're doing, traveling around to get teachers to love a program when it's just like, is it just survival in the schools that you're like,
Yeah.
our teachers are just trying to make it through the day? And I know, as a former teacher, as a counselor, I understand, just trying to get through the day with the lack of resources. Has that been really difficult?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you, Bree. Right now, we're at the very bottom of Maslow's social hierarchy of needs. It's
Yes.
basically people are in physiological mode. Can I eat? Can I drink? Can I sleep? It's getting kind of tough out there. And really, what I try to remind people is, hey, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm trying to remind you of the stuff that a lot of us forgot. I
Hmm.
mean, one of the most important things all Americans have to do right now is to stop taking themselves so darn seriously and laugh at themselves,
Hmm.
because you ain't all that and neither am I. And if you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for 1 week. Those little ones will set you straight. I mean, I once had this little girl, LaShonda. She raised her hand. I'm like, LaShonda, question. She's like, Miss Brassell, when are you going to trim your nose hair? I'm like, this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, LaShonda. I ain't all that. So I always tell the kids, if you're not laughing, you're not learning. We gotta keep this fun. And my goal every day is to create an interactive Disneyland where my kids are banging on my classroom door at 5 in the morning. They're so excited to come to school, and they're in tears when they hear that final bell because they don't want to leave. If I can do that every single day, I'm doing my job.
That's an amazing vision. And I hope, like, every single educator, whether you are on the front lines of education or somewhere in the peripherals of it, can embody that in some way. It's so important what you said about laughter too, because laughter can be an anchor for us as well. Especially in an education setting, if there's something that sets laughter into motion, that that action combined with that learning, it can stick together, because a child will remember what they laughed at. They'll remember in that moment. And so if you're able to have those anchors and anchor them to reading and anchor them to the learning, that is definitely a recipe for success in the classroom.
Yeah, I always use, like, my kindergartners. I used to say, "I hope to God this isn't the best year of your life. I hope it's next year and the year after that." I went to high school with guys that are still talking about when we played high school football together. I mean, the windshield's a lot bigger than the rear view mirror. I want us getting better every single day, and I want us. I mean, I tell the little ones, I'm like, hey, the average adult laughs 15 times a day. The average kindergartner laughs 300 times a day. You all need to make me laugh 315 times every day. And then they get all stressed. Well, we're going to make them laugh, but I want it to be fun. And it's one of the things I'm training teachers all the time. I'm like, hey, incorporate your passions. If
Mm-hmm.
all you love is quilting, incorporate quilting into all of your
Right.
subject areas. If you love Ohio State football, incorporate Ohio State. I mean, I love music, I love geography, and I love newspapers. So if you ever come to my classroom, you'll see us. I'm constantly coming up with songs for the kids to remember things. I want them to learn geography because Americans don't know anything about their geography. And I love new. I was a journalist before I was a teacher, and I want the kids to love newspapers because I think there's something for everybody in the newspaper.
Amazing. I love that. And I love how you're saying incorporating your passion. I mean, as everyone knows, here we are on the podcast. Purpose is a huge piece, which we will get to, but passion is 50% of the ingredient in purpose in my eyes, that in my definition specifically.
Absolutely,
So
Bree. I mean, I have never seen that inspirational teaching movie where they say he went to the inner city and inspired his students by using the state's mandatory scripted reading program. I've never seen that movie, but you
nope.
see the movies where they use poetry or they're singing or they're acting or they're moving.
Mm-hmm.
I swear we spend all this money to figure out what kids are interested in and then make sure to eliminate it from the public education system. It drives me crazy. I mean, you and I talked before this, and I'm like, we spend over $5 billion a year on standardized testing, and there is no research to show that these standardized tests do anything. But we could reinvest that money and hire more school counselors for one,
Mm-hmm.
especially in these times we need them. We could hire PE teachers, get physical education. I mean, we have an obese society. We could bring back music and art and field trips, uh, anything to teach the kids kindness. I mean, it's crazy, but oh well.
Honestly, I could jump right on there with you and list about 10 more things off the top of my head alone that, we could be doing in education. And it's one of those things that, as individuals in the education system, we can only do what we can do. But it is super frustrating, and you just hope that needle, with everyone doing what they can do and incorporating their passion and such, you hope that needle moves forward into, a more progressive education system where, students can guide their own learning and, sort of understand, learn in a way that's not necessarily just fitting a square peg into a round hole, so to speak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, if you're teaching 33 kids, guess what? You've got probably 33 completely different learning styles and
Mm-hmm.
motivational things. I was hoping that the pandemic, that all of a sudden teachers would get these huge salary raises once parents had to involuntarily homeschool their own children and figure out, wow, this isn't easy.
Yeah.
I always tell parents, I'm like, think about doing that with 33 strange kids. You can't even control your own kids. Can you imagine all these other kids? Like, my heart goes out to teachers, and we need to do whatever we can to support them. And I think I was blessed. I've had wonderful mentors throughout my career. And when I started teaching elementary school, I taught at a school where I was the only man at my school. I was the only white person at my school. I taught with predominantly elderly African American women from the South who all had been teaching for at least 20 years. And my mentor was Mrs. Turner. Mrs. Turner had been teaching for 40 years. Mrs. Turner was from Alabama. She believed in two things: discipline and the Bible. When her little ones got out of line, she started reading aloud Revelations to them. And it was this beautiful woman, this saint, who took me under her wing, and she taught me a system on how to bring joy into my classroom. We had a principal one year, we'll call him Voldemort. And this guy would just come into my classroom every day and announce to the kids that I was the worst teacher on the planet. I mean, he was killing me. But I had my guardian angel, Mrs. Turner. It was Mrs. Turner that came in, and she's like, Miss Brassell, you ain't going to last long. You let that negative energy affect you. Next time you have negative energy come in this classroom, you do as I do. She's like, repeat after me. Uh-huh. I go, uh-huh. She's like, uh-huh, uh-huh. She's like, oh, oh. She's like, then you shut the door and do it your way. She's like, Miss Brassell, I've been here for 40 years. They've had 35 different reading programs. I got one, mine, and it works. And I loved her. She was, the most incredible human being. And so hopefully I can impart that kind of wisdom. And that's what I tell the teachers on the front lines now. I'm like, hey, you know, all we care about are the results, how you get there. As long as you're not damaging kids, if you actually want to make learning fun, go ahead and go for it.
Yeah.
Close the door. I mean, that's the best teachers I see, and that's what they're doing all the time.
We definitely need more Mrs. Turners in this world, and
Yeah.
or ones like her. I totally agree, and again, it's like how do you bring that why into the classroom? That fun piece, that piece that makes it stick for kids, and that is not just following the curriculum standards, but finding out how you can get kids to follow the curriculum standards using what their interests are, at infusing what makes them tick into what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just got to call it on all the time. I'm very honest with the kids. Like when I used to say, hey, we have to take this stupid standardized test, because like he said stupid. I'm like, yeah, this is stupid. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna ace this test, and then they'll have to get rid of it, because if we just complain and we do poorly on it, everybody's gonna say, oh, that's the reason they complain. But if we do the best on it, then people actually have to start paying attention. I've never taught a kid how to love reading by doing a scripted reading program. I've asked thousands of people, how did you learn how to read? And I've never once had a person say, oh, the way I learned how to read was my grandma, Nana. She had this rocking chair, and she'd sit me on her lap, and we'd rock back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And she'd smile at me and point at the words and go, alligator, ball. No, but that's what I see happening in schools all the time. That's not how you get kids to love reading. Even my own kids, when we're reading a boring book, one of the games we'll play is every time I turn a page, they'll be like, do this page like a robot. So I'm like, once upon a time, like, do this one like, a rock star or whatever. And we make it fun that way. What I'm trying to do is to create memorable experiences. When I was an administrator, teachers come up to me every day and it would be like, oh, Danny, I taught 20 standards today. I'm like, really? See how many they remember tomorrow. I'm like, I think you're doing a great job if you teach 3 things a day, if they stick. Our job as teachers, as parents, is how do we get information to stick? I've had kids remember a concept because I wore a hat during that lesson, or we did the lesson underneath the desk, or we did it outside. We had to expose kids to lots of different things. When I was in Japan, by law, 31 school days a year are mandatory field trip days. That was amazing to me.
Oh, wow.
It was incredible. Like in my school district, we were lucky to get one every 3 years, but you can either gripe about it or you can do something about it. And so, you're in the New York area. There's probably like 200 universities nearby. I used to invite international students to come to my classroom all the time. Most of my students were African American, Latino. It doesn't take a lot to turn them on. You bring in some student from China. They're like, "Can you speak Chinese?" And the person speaks some Mandarin. They're like, "Oh, that's awesome." Kids are great. That's what I love about kids. The one time I took them, we went to the LACMA, to the LA Art Museum, and I'm like, oh, did you see that incredible Van Gogh painting? And they're like, no, did you see the guard picking his nose? I'm like, that's cool. It's interesting to see what kids pick up on all the time. And then that's one of the things for teachers that are watching and listening right now. If you really want to have fun, on the very last day of school, I used to have a contest to see which student impersonated me the best. It will freak you out how much the kids remember about you. It always startled me like crazy.
That's amazing. Wow. All of my fellow educators that are listening right now, I expect a check-in at the end of June because I want to hear the reports back. That is great. Oh my gosh. So there's a couple things that I want to transition to because there's so much we could talk about here. I feel like we could talk about education specifically for days and hours on end. I want to learn a little bit more about you prior to putting together this program and sort of becoming this educator and reading ambassador. Talk to me about what led up to education being it for you and reading being it for you.
Well, it's kind of funny, Bree. Before I was in Washington D.C. I had the greatest job in the world. I was a journalist, and I got to meet every major newspaper editor in the country, and they were all offering me jobs. I had a major daily offer me a job to do the city beat for $16,500 a year, and then a friend of mine told me that they were hiring teachers in Compton, California, in South Central LA for $25,200 a year. So I always tell people I became an educator for the noblest of reasons, for the high pay. And it turned out it was a great fit. I loved working with the kids. I loved working with the parents. I never liked working with bureaucracy. It drives me nuts. People putting walls in front of you. But I love kids, and I love figuring out ways to reach the kids that I kind of like to be Ellis Island and accept the huddled masses that nobody else wants. Because there's not. I always tell my kids, I'm like, sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you because they only give me the best and the brightest. I mean, it's all psychology all the time. Whether I'm teaching my little ones or my older ones, because I've taught all age levels, as they exit my classroom every day, they always have to hear me say the same refrain. I always say, remember, kids, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. Only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. So go out into this world, do the right thing, and make this world a better place. They always had to hear that every single day. But I believe that. I mean, that's why you do it. I looking into those little eyes, and I'm like, I did that once with my little ones. I'm like, okay, hey, because they weren't going to buy the yearbook. I'm like, you got to buy the yearbook. Look at the pictures of everybody. Be like, oh yeah, that kid used to chew on glue all day, and now he's like a Supreme Court justice. And that girl, she was picking her nose all the time, and now she's a senior senator. And then one of my, Deshaun's like, yeah, and there's Mr. Brassell. He used to be my teacher. Now he's dead. I'm like, yeah, right.
No.
The mouths of babes.
Oh my God. Wait, I know I'm going to, after we're done recording, I'm going to go back to that saying, and I got to listen to it over and over because I think that is so awesome. And, the kids must have looked at you a couple times cross-eyed, and then by the end of the year, they probably had it memorized.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
we do a lot of singing. I love writing songs for the kids because when I was a kid, that's how I learned. It sticks with me when it's to a song. And so whenever a kid can't remember something, I always just make a song out of it.
Amazing. I love it. That is so awesome. So for you, kind of going back to the original education sort of fell into your lap. It wasn't necessarily part of the plan. It helped it helped in your life plan with a larger pay, and then you ended up loving it for life.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting, yeah, because you have to make more money eventually, it seems like. So in order to make more money, you can't be a teacher, you have to be an administrator. So I became an administrator, and I was really good at that job, but I didn't like it. It was a lot of negativity. It was actually the same reason I left journalism. Journalism was getting very negative, and I don't want to be around. I want to be around. So I listen to your podcast. I want to be around people that lift me up, not tear me down. When President Ford was president, he let it slip that he always started his day by reading the sports page, and all these journalists freaked out. They're like, "You're the leader of the free world. How can you read the sports page before the front page?" And he said, "Well, the sports page celebrates man's achievements. The front page just shows all of his failures."
Wow.
There's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth. And that's why, my little ones, I can give an argument for why every grade level is the best grade level ever. But my real passion is with the little ones because they don't know what they can't do yet. And they say amazing things every day. I had this beautiful little girl, Maya. She comes up to me at recess one day. She's so excited. She's like, Miss Brassell, this is Anjanae. Anjanae is Nikisha's friend. Nikisha is my friend. So that means Anjanae's my friend too. I'm like, wow, what a lovely way to look at the world. I mean, I need to spend a lot more time with people like that. That's the best thing the pandemic taught me. I went on a media fast because it doesn't help me. It just puts me in a rotten mood. So I started listening to podcasts. I started reading a lot more books. I doubled my reading. And, who I don't know why people are so fascinated with the news anyway. If there's a war in whatever country, can you do anything about it? Are you the one doing anything about it? I mean, if you're not part of the solution, why are you filling your head with that problem? So I life is too short. You need to, and this is what I tell the kids all the time. You only have a little bit of time, man. You were put here for a purpose,
Yes,
you know, and
absolutely.
you know, all of you have poetry inside of you. I mean, that's one of the, I use a lot of poetry with the kids all the time. And I share a poem by Emily Dickinson that goes, I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They banish us, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public like a frog. To tell your name the live long day to an admiring bog. It's one of the first poems I teach the kids. And then we start talking about it. I'm like, if you read this poem, this woman had some serious self-esteem issues. Wouldn't you agree? And they're all like, yeah. I'm like, a lot of people don't know this. Emily Dickinson never showed her poems when she was alive. They found her poems in the attic. This woman had
Mm.
no idea how much her words would mean to millions of people. And I look at all my kids every day. I'm like, all of you have poetry inside of you. Maybe your poetry's poetry. Maybe it's the way you shoot a basketball. Maybe it's the kindness that you show your mother every day. But you were put on this earth for a purpose, and you need to show that every single day.
That just gave me chills. I love that so much. Why were you not in the classroom when I was in the classroom, either, as co-teachers or I mean, man, you are so powerful in what you're doing.
I was a pain, Bree. I was a pain because I'm one of these people that always ask why. Because I
Mm,
believe that if the answer to the question is not because that's what's best for kids, then I'm like, why are we doing it then? Why? Oh, if your answer is because the state mandated it, I'm like, what's that mean? That's not an answer. I mean, why are we doing this? And so I was a pain. So no, you wouldn't have wanted to have me because I'm just a pain. I'm constantly questioning the system.
it's better that we have crossed paths here. Well, I want to talk. We have to get to the purpose piece. I mean, I love that you infuse it into your education and your teaching and making sure students know that they have a purpose. I want to know for you where that fits into your life. What is purpose to you, and how does that fit there?
Purpose is your reason for being. I mean,
Yeah.
making this world a better place than when you got
Mm-hmm.
on it. You know, it was interesting because I used to do to pay for college. I do stand up comedy, and one of my professors. Who had seen me do lots of comedy, he watched me do a presentation for parents on reading, and he said this, and I don't know if he realized how much it would mean to me. He said, Danny, this is what you should be doing. Like, did you see all those people were intimidated walking in this room? And not only were they laughing as they left, but they were all talking to one another and excited and stuff. It's like you could really make a huge impact this way. I mean, I don't know if he even remembers that he told me that, but it stuck with me. And it's something I love. I mean, there's nothing better than doing a teacher training and all these teachers come in with all this work that they plan on doing, and then they complain to me at the end of the day. They're like, I got nothing done because I loved paying attention to you. I'm like, well, good. That's what I was trying to do. Just too much boring stuff out there. And let's face it, you're not going to reach kids today without being entertaining in
Well,
some way. You got to figure something out. It's edutainment. I mean, we're up a lot. We're up against a lot. I mean, the project I'm working on right now, I teamed up with this wonderful guy, Dermot Hudner, out of Ireland. He created a program called Cyber Smarties, which is a social media platform for kids ages 6 to 12. Only kids are allowed on it. And the way they make sure only kids are allowed is they're approved by both the police department and the schools.
well,
And it basically teaches kids how to use social media in a positive way, because social media kind of emerged and nobody ever actually teaches kids how to interact. And I think we were really failing as adults. I see a lot of the negative stuff going on Twitter and Facebook and things like this. Well, this platform, let's say you type a message to me, Bree, you're like, Danny, I think you're ugly. It won't let you send the message. Instead, it pops up a bunch of different here's better ways to talk to people, and it gives you all kinds of alternatives. And
ah,
it's basically eliminated cyberbullying in Ireland. We now have the program in India and the UAE, and we're opening it up to Turkey to 9 million students coming in May. And basically, Dearmid and I have the exact same passion: is how do you develop positive habits in children? Adults get all cranky and stubborn, and they won't, they always know everything, which to me is one of the biggest dangers in the
Yeah.
world. UCLA basketball coach John Wooden, he said, it's the things you learn after you know it all that make the biggest impact. And he's right about that. And
Yes.
so if I can't work with adults, I'll work on the kids. How do I create? And I totally believe this is, I might have somebody in my program is going to win the Nobel Peace Prize someday. Somebody in my program is going to cure cancer. Somebody in my program is going to be a really good parent because of the skill set that we're teaching them at a very young age. And so, again, long answers to your short questions, but purpose drives you. You should be jumping out of bed every single morning. The football coaches, Jim and John Harbaugh, their dad was a football coach, and they always joke that when they were little, he used to always get them out of bed, and he'd say, let's attack today with an enthusiasm unknown to humankind. And I'm like, wow, what a great phrase. I just thought, yeah, if you're not excited about it, I mean, one of the best speeches I ever saw was the Stanford commencement address by Steve Jobs, where he says, every day I look in the mirror and ask myself if I'm having fun. And if I'm not having fun for a couple of days in a row, I realize I need to be doing something else. That's a really good tip for everybody out there.
Absolutely. Well, bringing it back, I don't ask short questions for short answers. So we wouldn't be deep conversations with dope individuals. It would just be dope individuals, and it would be about 15 minutes or so. So I am happy to have any length answer, because that's how we get there, and you bring such value. I mean, there's so many things I want to touch on that you just said, but the last piece is really resonating, is that having fun piece. And it goes back to what we're teaching kids, and we have to have fun in the classroom. Steve Jobs will say it at a commencement speech, because you have to have fun all the time. Like, you have to have fun. This is your life. We're living one life. This is yours, and you don't get another one. So if that fun piece, or that exhilaration, or that, whatever your equivalent of fun might be, because, some people love that adrenaline. That is really fun, where that's really scary for some people. So whatever fun looks like to you, it should certainly be a huge piece of the journey that you're on. It is absolutely incorporated into purpose. So thank you for bringing that in.
Thank you. I love it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that he talks about in his presentation, which I love, is how you never know how you're going to use the things that you learn. And the example he gives was that when he audited a class at Reed College on calligraphy, that everybody was very famous for, and everybody thought it was a waste of time that he was taking calligraphy. But when he designed the Macintosh, he decided to include different fonts for people to select. And then he says, and of course, Microsoft stole the idea, because that's what they always did with that. I mean, I love those little rivalries, but I'm like, wow, that's a really cool story that's where he got the idea for that. And you never know how you're going to use it. I mean, I'm a huge USC football fan, and it drives me nuts, but there's a great story about the coach Newt Rockne for Notre Dame. He was trying to figure out an offense to beat USC with, and he was driving his wife crazy. And so she forced him to go to the ballet that night. And while he was sitting there watching the ballet, he was watching the way the dancers moved. And that night, he developed the offense that would later win him 4 national championships. You never know what's going to be meaningful to, or, the example I gave earlier with that professor who just made a flippant comment, but it actually transformed the way I viewed my mission in life. And how many times, every day you have a choice. You can either be the light or the darkness. You can be either Ben Kenobi or Darth Vader. I mean, I choose to be the light. It takes just as much effort to say something positive to a person as it does to say something negative. But when we start focusing on the positives and make the world a little bit better place.
I mean, again, just so powerful. And I also, I wanted to commend you on the Cyber Smarties program as well. This is just so cool. And I'm just hearing all these stories that you're telling, even with the calligraphy story. that might be someone in the Cyber Smarties program from around the world, or I'm saying that right, Cyber Smarties, right? Yes. Okay, I wanted to make sure I heard it right. But that's going to be one of those students is going to come in with that story and give that incredible commencement speech, or any of the students that you're working with. But
well, and one of our sponsors is UNICEF, and I have big plans. Both Dearman and I have big plans. I'm looking at the world, and my goal is eventually every kid in like Africa, barefoot kid, has a cell phone with our program, Cyber Smarties, on that cell phone, and it'll ask questions like, "Did you eat breakfast today?" And based on their answer, if they haven't had breakfast, our satellite communications will be able to actually get food into that community so that kid can eat breakfast. I mean, there's so many possibilities. When people freak out about technology, I'm like, there's definitely dangerous things about technology, but I always embrace the positives and things. I mean, right now, there's some barefoot kid on a dirt floor somewhere, maybe he hasn't eaten dinner, but if that kid has a laptop and an internet connection, they have the exact same access as the founder of Google. I mean, the world just got a whole lot smaller. You don't have to be born in New York City anymore to make a huge impact. I mean, I was listening to a teacher complain to me about Zoom the other day, and I said, I understand what you're saying, but let me ask you this. How would the pandemic have gone 10 years ago when we didn't have Zoom? And she thought about it in a different way. I'm like, yeah, let's stop griping. Let's start figuring out how to use it to benefit.
It's perfectly put. It really is. We definitely, we have to figure out how to use it as tools, because it has, for sure, it can be the enemy if we allow it to. And it's not that it's the easiest to navigate always, but you're right. We have so much power with the access that we're given. And I just, all of the missions, how mission driven you are and how purpose driven you are, and just making a difference in kids' lives around the world. Just, it does not go unnoticed. I'm at a loss for words at this point, because it's so incredible, the major impact that you're making.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bree. I mean, it was either Socrates or Uncle Ben from Spider-Man who said, "With great power comes great responsibility." It's very, very important words for all of us to heed to every day.
Absolutely, it doesn't matter whose mouth it came from at that point. Oh, man. Well, we are nearing the end of the podcast. We have about just shy of 10 minutes left. A couple things I like to do in the last 10 minutes. First, we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire round. Super simple. It's just for fun. Then I'm going to give you the floor to sort of open up for final words, final thoughts, whatever you'd like to leave listeners with. And then you can let everyone know where they can find you. And please, with all of that, let us know any programs or books that you have put out that you'd like our listeners to check into as well.
Okay.
All right.
James Lipton style, but don't make me curse.
Okay. All right. So at the beginning of the show, I said that we were going to talk about 3 things: development, decision-making, and dedication to purpose. I feel like between everything that you're doing in education, through the story that led you there, I mean, we certainly covered all 3. And it has been a pleasure speaking to you on those 3. So these questions are just for fun. The first one is on development. Currently, in this very moment, are you working more on personal development or professional development?
Oh, always personal development. Everybody should be. Jim Rohn said, well, of course, I just forgot what he just said, but he said, work at a job, you'll make an income, work on yourself, and you'll make a life. Is basically the gist of what he said.
That's so important to hear those words too. I always say, most guests, when I give that question, it's like, well, I'm working on both. I'm like, I know you're working on both. That's why I gave the question, because I want to know in this very moment.
A response, yeah. It's like saying Neapolitan. I'm like, I don't want. Come on.
Right. I mean, all of the research shows that the personal development is very much, like you said in that saying, it is connected to professional development. If you're not developing yourself, then you're not developing in life. But okay, great. I appreciate you giving me that succinct and definitive answer. The next one is on decision making. This one is unique. I'd like to know if you make more of your decisions based on choice, you're a facts and numbers guy, or guiding voice, meaning you follow gut feeling, intuition, spirituality, or something else.
Choice. I'm much more. It drives my wife crazy. I look at numbers all the time.
Facts and numbers, yeah, that is makes sense. It's pretty evenly split at this point based on my guests, which are going which way. Okay, and the last one is on dedication to purpose. Is purpose something that is found in a singular moment in time, or is it a daily practice?
Oh, it's definitely a daily practice. I don't
Mm.
see how anybody could find that otherwise. And that's been one of the amazing things in my life is as I get older, every time I look back on the worst things that ever happened to me, I realize, wow, that was the best thing ever to happen to me. So it's
Hmm.
that constant reflection. And hopefully the pandemic got a lot of people to take the time to pause and
Mm.
to use time to reflect, to turn off their devices and just think.
Right.
And when you can pray, you can just have silence, but have a little bit of peace, or else we're all going to go crazy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that reflection piece that is so important in everything that we're doing. But I love how you incorporated it into purpose because our purpose can change. What brings us meaning in life can change day to day, not always day to day, but year to year. If you can look back on your years and understand sort of what led you to where you're at, make adjustments and keep moving forward. So that reflection piece is super important.
Yeah, I remember watching an interview with Steven Spielberg, and he said that if he made Close Encounters of the Third Kind today, it would be a totally different movie because
Mhm.
he's a different person. And he's like, wow, in that movie, the dad just leaves his family. He's like, there's no way I would do that. I'm like, wow, it's interesting. As your priorities change as you get
Yes,
older, and you know,
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, those are my three rapid fire questions. So we have a few minutes. I want to leave you the floor. Whatever final message you'd like to leave with listeners, and then let us know where to find you and what to look up when we're looking up your name.
well, I'll accomplish them both right now. So I wanted
Yeah.
to give everybody, as a thank you for having me, Bree, I wanted to give everybody a couple of goodies. So if you go to freegiftfromdanny.com, freegiftfromdanny.com, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary e-copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. It's a book I wrote for a school principal who was trying to keep his faculty positively engaged. So I said, okay, I'll write you a book. So every week I give you a concept, I give you an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy because you're an adult. So I also give you a children's picture book recommendation that demonstrates the same concept. You can read that in 5 minutes. Too many people are down. There's a lot of people hurting in the world right
It's
now.
very true.
And one tip I give to everybody is, a lot of the best wisdom comes from children's picture books. Reread some of your favorite children's picture books as an adult. You'll get a different take on it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Seuss wrote the Lorax 50 years before anybody was paying attention to the environment. There's all kinds of wisdom in
Yeah.
these books. I'm also, when you go to the site, you'll also get access to a 5-day reading challenge I did this summer with about 700 parents around the world. So every day for 5 consecutive days, I'll do 1 hour of giving you all kinds of ideas on how to get your kid excited about reading. I mean,
Mm.
a basic one that I like to give parents is because we talked about technology during this. I think television's here to stay. And I always look at, well, how do we embrace the technology and use it to our advantage? So President Bush Sr., 30 years ago, signed a very important law in this country that mandated every single television set sold in America has to have closed captioning. So here's the tip for parents out there. Turn on the closed captioning on the TV. And parents will say, well, wait a second, the show's in English and the subtitles are in English. What good does that do? I'm like, well, that's a fair point, but let me make a point. Have you ever watched a show with subtitles and not looked at the subtitles? It's very difficult to do. Your brain is directed towards that text. There's actually research that supports this. If you look at reading scores around the world, the more kids watch TV, what do you think happens to their reading scores? It always goes down in every country in the world
Mm.
except for one. The country that watches the most TV in the world also has the highest reading scores in the world. It's Finland. And people always ask me, well, how can that be? I'm like, well, because Finland makes really bad TV shows. And so what they have to do is they import all these old American sitcoms like Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island, and they have to subtitle them in Finnish for the kids. Easy trick, and I guarantee you that works, because the whole basis of my program is we're going to develop better habits. And what we're trying to do is get the kids reading for 20 minutes a day. And here's what you need to know. The research shows those minutes don't have to be consecutive. So it can be 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. And being read aloud to is just as good as reading on your own. A lot of people don't know that over half of the Fortune 500 CEOs are dyslexic. Dyslexics actually have an interesting ability to process auditory information at a much more rapid rate than the rest of us. And so, I'll work with dyslexics and say, you can read. That's what audiobooks are for. I mean, I was listening to an audiobook when I was shoveling snow today. Listening to a Malcolm Gladwell book. It was great. So you can listen to books, and I'll tell parents, hey, if it takes you 10 minutes to drive your kid to and from school each day, put in an audiobook. There's your 20 minutes right there, is going to and from school. And kids ain't stupid. They don't see us reading. They're never going to be reading. I used to run a nonprofit called Real Dads Read, and I used to always tell the dads, I'm like, hey, Dad, you want to know why your kid likes football so much? Because that's the only time you spend with them. If you spent your time reading with them, you'd be a reader. Whether we like it or not, kids are paying attention to us all the time. It's a very important responsibility. So, again, freegiftfromdanny.com. And whenever you need any, if you want, I have another website. I got a zillion websites. I collect websites like trading cards. I've got one of the top book clubs online. It's called lazyreaders.com. If you subscribe, it's a free subscription once a month for the rest of your life. I update it with 10 book recommendations, 3 or 4 adult level, 3 or 4 young adult level, and 3 or 4 children's level books, all under 250 pages. So you have something you can read when you're stuck in a boring meeting. We've been up since 2003. Within 5 months, we started beating Oprah and Amazon and all these book clubs. And I asked my webmaster, how is this possible? We discovered it was because middle school boys discovered the site and started going there looking for recommendations on books to do their book reports on. So great short books for all ages. And I always try to make sure the books are a little bit more positive. Too much negativity. One of the things I always tell kids is you are what you read, so read good stuff. One of my mentors, Charlie Tremendous Jones, used to say, the same today as you will be in 5 years, except for 2 things: the people you meet and the books you read. So I always tell people, be wise, surround yourself with people that lift you up, and make sure to fill your brain with books that really inspire you. So, and you inspire me, Bree. I'm so grateful that you have me on this podcast, and just holler whenever you need anything. You're making a positive difference every single day. Remember that.
Thank you so much. Danny, you are bringing such incredible value, not only to my listeners, but sincerely to the world. I mean, you're doing so much. You have so much impact. You have such a broad reach, and the world is lucky to have you. I am so thankful to have had you on, and I look forward to us connecting again and staying in touch. Of course. Yes. Dr. Danny Brassell, everyone. It has been such a pleasure. As I end all of my episodes, until next time, let this be the moment.